Let's start with Mary Wiener's question then from Holy Cross. Is that what you're talking about, Paul? Is the panel
Yeah.
replacing a 2010 95 AFUE natural gas furnace with a 30 kilowatt electric furnace is beneficial and should be rebated. Is that what you're talking about?
Right. And then, she followed up by saying is because the heat pump quote was cost prohibitive, like Marcus was talking about when he was looking at it, for their home. So, yeah. So I can, Mary, I'll start with this, and I'm sure Ann and maybe Brian wants to chime in too. But in that regard, I'd say from a societal perspective, 100%, I agree that electric furnaces should be considered for rebates. Though I think really where we should be focusing our rebates is in air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps to be more aggressive there, because the COP, the coefficient of performance, is so much better, 3 to sometimes 5 and 6 times better in the case of a ground source heat pump. So, it's a far more efficient use of electricity, doing it that way than just a standard electric furnace. But, like I said, we should be thinking about that. Honestly, my preference would be that if we're to rebate electric furnaces, we would somehow marry that with solar PV. It's like you have an electric furnace, you're putting solar PV on your house. If you don't have a good solar, don't have good location for solar, it's like, well, you should really think about an air source heat pump, or even ground source heat pumps, because I've been learning about some great projects, ones that we're considering for doing an interview for a future Part of a Building episode, where they're doing retrofit ground source heat pumps in central Denver. On infill lots, and I was just like, I thought the cost would be ridiculously prohibitive, and it's from what I'm seeing initially, it's not that bad. I was like, wow, okay. So it's thinking along those things. I'd say first, would be, and I understand you went with the electric furnace choice. I hope you do have a good location for solar on your home, because that would be the smartest thing you could do, is help offset that way, or pay for your electricity up front by putting solar on your home, and then the electricity that you'll be using with your electric furnace won't impact you nearly as hard economically. So that'd be my thoughts.
And Connie, can you turn the remaining 19 participants on where they could actually interact with their questions? And Mary, I don't know if you had.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. I think it's more what I'm getting at. If you look at the definition of beneficial electrification, and everything is going toward heat pumps, but in some instances they are so cost prohibitive. So how do we electrification and energy efficiency administrators rebate a situation like this? How, do we rebate it? Does it meet those 3 beneficial electrification criteria that Brian talked about? And yeah, it will add, it's, or do you couple it with time of day rate or something like that, which I would hate for a 30 kW furnace to come on at our peak cost of 24 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think from the framework that I described, my biggest concern would be grid efficiency. If this system is not being controlled in concert somehow, with some sort of supervisory control to understand when it's coming online, when it's not, it's ramping up, preheating. If we don't have any of that in place, I would not be confident that it's going to be operated in a grid efficient way, and therefore it's not going to meet that prong of our evaluation.
And do you think Excel would rebate something like this?
It's not in our 21-22 plan, but I think we're going to see such a ongoing development of what makes sense, what doesn't. There very well may be a need for it that we just missed this go round, and we get to pick it up next time. We're so committed to customer choice, and not one size ever fits all, ever. So if this is something that that makes sense, if it becomes obvious to us, and then we would certainly consider it.
And to put the role of the EBC in like what you're raising, Mary and Anne, is, this is where we would pull together some of our contractors to talk about solutions, and maybe the manufacturers, who are members as well, and multiple of them versus just a couple, to say this is becoming an issue, and it's something that we want to address and come up with some solutions. And by putting all different sides in the room together, on the Zoom together, this is something I think we should look at. And if you're seeing that happening, Mary, then I think, maybe that's where we're talking about EBC using our membership, reaching out beyond what we've traditionally done with Excel, and, looking at this for all utilities, or at least the progressive ones like you guys who are, working on the beneficial electrification goals. I don't know if that's helpful or an idea. That's what we do. That's what our policy action committee is designed. That's what we tackled when we did the DSM.
Yeah, and I think the big thing that, and Anne touched on, and we've been talking in a lot of groups about training, and you have to bring the cost of installing heat pumps down in order for, if electrification is going to be based on the success of getting heat pumps installed in people's homes, you've got to get the price down.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a super good point. I think something that I'm seeing as well is, between all of the more legislative policy nonprofits, NRDC and WRA and SWEEP, and there's a long list. And I think those groups are struggling with what needs to go into legislative ideas. And there might be some discussion around, I think what I'm seeing is, it's almost, we need to identify the 3 major levers that need to be pulled. And I think, Mary, you're saying, and I think, Anne, you both agree, it's like training, the cost of install, the quality install we hear about all the time, but getting it into the market, maybe that's that first piece. So we're going around circles trying to decide where to start, and so, that's, whenever I hear those points, I'm always recording and trying to figure out which ones rise to the surface are going to have the most impact first. Like we said, going to the first adopters, what do they need first?
I really feel like we first have to figure out how to frame this up with customers, because beneficial electrification is an industry term. It is not a customer facing term, at least in my opinion. Like, I didn't know what it meant, and when I first heard it, I had no idea what that meant. And decarbonization may be too far out on the green scale to be generally interesting to all customers, right? We don't want to set ourselves up with a phrase that only appeals to this set of customers instead of broader customers. So I don't know how we're going to frame that up, other than, we have to continue talking about what customers are interested in on a more general scale, right? They want to be smart about how they're going to use their energy. They want to be able to make the choices that are best for them at that time. My opinion may be very different than yours, and it may switch from year to year, right? Anyway, I think we have to start off by giving contractors some, manufacturers, distributors, contractors, and start framing it up for them so that they know what to look for in the market, understand why it's important, right? Doing the big picture, right? Paint the big picture so that they understand what's coming, why it's important, and help them identify which customers to do those bids for. But if I were a contractor, I have a successful business, and my business model is a traditional business model. Today, they're pretty much all in that category, right? What's going to be in it for me to change my business model? I think as an owner, I would be concerned about, am I going to have a longer installation times? Am I going to have a lot of callbacks? Those are two of the things, right? I need the technical knowledge so that I have an understanding of what it's about on a high level. And then I need specific information from my distributor, manufacturer, whose equipment I'm installing, so that I get my hands on it, I understand it, so that the fear of the unknown is lessened. And then, of course, pairing that up with the big picture. How do I express it to customers in a way that's going to make sense to them, and bid with confidence that if they buy it, I'm ready to install it. Like anything, right? New things don't come easily to people, and nor do businesses, right? If we're asking them to take a risk, but the risk factor to me that makes this worth doing is early adopters often set themselves up for long-term success over their competitors. And I do believe that to be absolutely true in regard to the kind of technologies we're talking about in support of our clean energy future. So we need to take the first steps, right? I don't know how we engage general customers yet, although Mary and Holy Cross in their set of customer trainings that they're going to do next month may prove us wrong on that. And I hope so, frankly. I'd love it if customers drove it and said to their contractors, we want you to bid this. So, there's always that possibility. We've seen it happen a couple of times. But I think, it's an ongoing help contractors become more knowledgeable and comfortable with the technology, so that they're more likely to engage in bidding it to customers than installing it and supporting it.
Mhm. Good point.
What do you guys think? Am I on the right track here or not?
Yeah, I mean, heat pumps are so interesting to me. Is in the United States, at least, it's totally regionally fractured in terms of the market. So in the South, it's over 50% of the market share is heat pumps. In the Northeast, it's less than 10%. And on the West Coast, it's like 20 to 30. And in the Midwest, it's like 15 to 20. So everywhere you go, there's different adoption levels and different levels of understanding. Heat pumps are so expensive in Colorado because it's cold climate heat pumps, which are a newer technology, high performing. They have, larger heat transfer, devices within them, better controls, and they cost more. And so they're cost prohibitive, but they perform a lot better than the heat pumps of, the last generation. And so, you get what you pay for. But I often look to Sweden and what they did many years ago in the early 90s. As a country, they just decided we want ground source heat pumps, and we're going to do it. We're going to tell the market how it needs to perform. We're going to set the specifications for the technology and the performance, how efficient they need to be. And nothing existed in the market that was as efficient as they wanted, but the market responded. They built them, and now there's 1.7 million heat pumps in Sweden, and there's only 1 million people. So, it's by far the biggest success story for heat pump market transformation. We should look at what they did and see where we can. The United States is a much different animal, but we do have the ability to do some top-down mandate, pressure that we can place on the market.
That's part of it, and it's likely to come, especially with the new administration as a start to that. It's amazing to me, though, how many communities and organizations within Colorado, even without the federal push in the last 4 years, have made their first commitment to their clean energy future, right? Because it makes sense. And it's just that to me is one of the most encouraging things that we've seen. And it's I think there's so much groundswell that's not just industry specific that are going to help drive this. So communities, City of Boulder, City and County of Boulder, City and County of Denver, Holy Cross, where they have such, that kind of all those communities walking that. Anyway, there's so much groundswell of interest, and they're talking to their, what do you call them, residents, their people, about it already. So I'm just very hopeful about where the information is going to come from. Is kind of all over. Brian, I don't think I have the same hope that you do, that the United States is going to respond in the same way that Sweden has. Do you?
I mean, I'm not going to hold my breath for it, but it would be nice. I mean, the Pacific Northwest is the closest to any region that's tried to really do what Sweden did with market transformation, and they've had some good success, and not nearly as impressive as Sweden, but I mean, it's certainly possible.
Good point. I'm sorry for interrupting. I was going to say they also have a propensity, a plethora. I love that word. A plethora of propane as their heating source, and that's a much clearer kind of path to the return on investment to go with an electric heating source. I'm kind of jealous about that, you know. And I've got to say, you know, yes, we'll have cold climate heat pumps, but why would we not also make available to customers the option of, you know, in, let's say it's summertime and customers are getting ready to, so their gas furnace is working, right? Not right now because it's summer. But if I have to replace my AC, I also see us making a big play for why would you not replace your AC with an air source heat pump and then use your gas furnace as backup? So instead of looking at the replacement cost of being both an AC and a furnace, which happens a lot, right? You get a better price break. Keep the furnace, put in the heat pump, so that you get started on that technology, and then who knows what will be available for a backup by the time that the gas furnace dies. So, you know, to me, that seems like a really great entry point. I hope so.
It's actually very common in other parts of the country where baseboard electric resistance heating is present, and then they're going to put in a mini split. They leave the baseboard as backup. Problem is that the controls don't coordinate, and if you turn on, you've got different thermostats controlling different systems, and you can end up overriding all of your savings potential by just not having the thermostat controlled properly for your baseboard heating. So, you know, there's still some challenges there to ensure that we actually get the benefits that we want from the investments that we're making.
Yes, so true. And that's frankly part of the level of detail that what we know from a training perspective is that we're going to learn as we go. Those controls are going to become available. If they're not already available, there's a big demand for, I think, for that particular piece and the knowledge of how to do it. I hear from some that they already have it figured out. So it's a control board piece that's not that difficult, but who knows what combinations we're talking about. And the devil really is in the details, but we'll learn as we go.
Great. Any other comment? And Mary, I think Mary may have dropped off. Are you still there?
She did. She sent a note. She had to go.
I don't know if we want to address, I also see a question from Sam Beeson from Mitsubishi. And it says, Paul talked about right sizing systems. It seems that contractors are still sizing systems for the coldest, hottest day of the year, less a little. They want happy customers, and if there are a couple of days a year that are outside of the design conditions, they will likely get a call from a frustrated customer. How do we shift the customer expectation and the contractor comfort level so that the systems can be sized to provide the highest energy efficiency and best comfort level for 99% of the year that is operating in design parameters? I feel like, Anne, you kind of touched on that already, but I don't know if there's some specific comments from Brian and Paul or anyone else.
I think there's a lot of great developments happening in personal space conditioning, you know, conditioning near the people so that they remain comfortable. You don't have to over condition all the other unoccupied space. I mean, we've had radiant heating panels for decades and they work pretty well. And for, small systems can be a relatively, energy efficient way to heat bodies in spaces. But yeah, more technologies like that, personal cooling, personal heating at the person so that they remain comfortable. You don't have to over condition.
So there's those phrases, and would you say personal heating and cooling, basically? Like, I've never used that phrase.
That's great.
Right? Versus beneficial electrification. Let's
I like it.
your personal heating and cooling. Yeah.
I like it as well, Brian. My brain goes towards some cool space suits that we'd be walking around in. But anyway, okay, maybe not to that level, but we wouldn't spread COVID anymore, right? Hey, there we go. Kill two birds with one stone. But anyway, for me, what that brings back to, it's a very good question, is like, it just speaks to, we've not prioritized making thermal envelopes the way they should be to last for 100 years. We've had this misguided, well, it's missing information from the marketplace. The marketplace is an amazing tool, but if we don't account for what we're trying to account for now, which is to say, what are the societal impacts of using too much, fossil fuel energy? Well, we didn't account for what happened to pollute the air and pollute water with that. We finally are starting to do that, now. And buildings represent where our values were at the time. It was like purely low cost transaction, upfront, home purchasing, at the time. It wasn't about like, how does this building, this home fit into the context of 100-year thought process? It wasn't there. So it's the sizing, load sizing for things. We would have no problem sizing to more like 95% of the typical temperatures if we built thermal envelopes to be highly insulated, highly airtight, because they would hold the heat and cooling so much longer. It would ride through, especially the hot days, and it can ride through very well still the cold days. If we had thermal mass brought in for buildings, then it really rides it out. So it's again, my challenge. I don't think there's any builders left, on this, but it's like, architects, builders, and things we want to showcase in the Heart of a Building videos are to challenge them and say, build for the cliche 7 generations. Don't build for a transaction of cheap now. It's like that's what's been killing us for 100 years now, as far as the envelope.
The best video of its case best video I've seen recently, it was from the Wall Street Journal, titled "The Home of Tomorrow." I don't know if you saw it. It's just a couple of days old, and I would love for us to do, something along those lines. That it's highlighting about 10 different technologies, which includes really tight envelope and that kind of thing, but it's not necessarily focused on what we have, what we're going to rebate now, which if we were going to invest in that kind of thing, we'd want it to touch on what's possible in the future and what's available now, right? Do the combination. But it's so cool the way that they, highlight from it's kind of a cartoonish thing, but very engaging and fast enough that it would be a great resource for contractors to show customers and put on websites and that kind of thing. So just I was wowed by it.
Anne, would you mind forwarding that link? Make it easy for me and
I'd be
others.
happy to.
Sure. If you want to forward it, we'll just send it out to the group with our response.
Cool.
Yeah, let me cut and paste it.
I'm going to have to drop off, folks, because I've got a 10 o'clock coming up, but I really enjoyed being a part of this, and I'm glad for the people that hung out longer with us. So that's great.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Super appreciate it. And a lot of good ideas. I think that's the goal was to, create an understanding for all of us and more collectively of what in the world we need to do next. So super appreciate it, and appreciate everybody hanging on, and we will see you in the new year.